Have you ever had something that you loved that you had to give up? That is a very, very hard thing to do. And we're going to talk about that part of Hannah's story today from the Old Testament. So stay tuned.
Welcome to Bible Women in Bathrobes, the podcast where faith meets comfort. Join us Tuesday and Thursday mornings as the gals from Women Warriors of Light and their guests don bathrobes and dive into the inspiring stories of women in the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ. From Esther's bravery to the Sermon on the Mount, we explore it all with warmth, laughter, sisterhood, and maybe even a few sleepy-eyed moments. Tune in live or at your leisure as we learn lessons from Scripture which empower women today.
Welcome to Bible Women in Bathrobes. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson, and joining me today is my co-founder, Wendi Christensen, and she's the co-founder with Women Warriors of Light. Wendi, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
And I also have Amy Johnson on with us today. Welcome back, Amy. It's good to have you.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
And today we are continuing the story of Hannah. And let me kind of bring you up to speed of where we are in the story of Hannah. So Hannah was one of two wives of Elkanah, and she could not have children, but she was loved by Elkanah. And Peninnah had children and was very jealous and very mean-spirited and picked on Hannah because she couldn't have children. And we talked about that in our first episode on Hannah. And then we talked about how Hannah poured out her soul to God, and that the priest, Eli, saw her. And after discussion, he told her that, go in peace, the God of Israel grant thee thy petition. And so she went away joyfully. And that's kind of the point of the story we're at. We're like, well, now what happens? So we're going to pick this up in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 19. And so Hannah and her family had to go every year. They're very faithful in worshiping and come every year to give sacrifice to the Lord. So they went back home. And it says at the end of verse 19, Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And that in verse 20, it says, and she bare a son and called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked him of the Lord. And so we see this final, oh my goodness, joyful fulfillment, how she had waited years and years and years to be able to have a child, and she finally got the desire of her heart. And Wendi, I know you struggled with infertility. How was it when you finally had your first baby? You had a girl, right?
I did. I waited 7 years to have her. And when I was able to hold her, it was such a beautiful, wonderful blessing. You just can't describe the joy when you have put forth so much effort and so much work and mental toil, like Hannah did, right? I described that earlier. And then finally being able to hold that little girl, you feel like she's just such a precious gift from God. And I love that the scripture says that God remembered Hannah. And that's how I felt when I got to hold my baby for the first time, that he was blessing me. Not that he didn't remember me, but I think what they meant by that is it was a fulfillment of that promise. And that's exactly how I felt. Like the Lord had remembered me by blessing me with this beautiful baby.
Amy, any thoughts there?
I just thought it was kind of neat that we don't know the actual timeline, but Eli says you're gonna have your wish, right? Your desire, your petition. And it seems like it was pretty quick. There's been times in my life where I've had someone I trusted or even felt the confirming of the Lord that it's going to be okay. You're going to have what you're asking for. And it still took years more, right? And so I think that's kind of an interesting thing that that sometimes we pray and pray and pray, and we feel the confirming it's going to be good. And then it's still years and years later. And I think Hannah is an excellent, I don't know, she's just such a beautiful symbol and example of trusting in God, trusting in the Lord, that I, I'll just keep being, I'll just keep being faithful until you see me, so to speak, because sometimes when we don't get what we want, we feel unseen. And that's a hard feeling to have. But she just says, I'm upset, I'm bitter, but I'm gonna keep being faithful until and just trusting that the Lord sees me and that he will see me.
Yeah, love that. Um, and then uh, we pick it up again in verse 21, how Eli and his family, they went up every year to sacrifice, and Hannah said, I'm going to stay here with the baby um, until he is weaned, and then I will bring him to the house of the Lord, and bring him to the Lord. Because she had promised, she had vowed a vow to God that if he gave her a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord and give him to him. And so yeah, this is what it says in verse 22. Um, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord and there abide forever. And oh my goodness, you guys, I can't even imagine how hard that would have been for her to have prayed and prayed and prayed for a child, and then knowing that you're going to have to give him up now that you got him. That would be so hard. I feel it's almost like the story of Abraham and God asking him to sacrifice his son Isaac. It's kind of like that. Um, because she didn't live right by there. They had to go and visit Shiloh every time they did sacrifices. And so it wasn't like she was going to be able to be there and mother him for the rest of his life. She had him while he was a little baby, and then she gave him to God. Any thoughts on that process? Amy, why don't we start with you?
I actually have thought about this a lot. Before I even had children, when I was engaged, I remember thinking I wanted 12. Bless me.
Mm,
Um, but I also remember the feeling of I want 12 so that I can raise them up unto the Lord. And I think in many ways, there's not a lot of ways that we can really relate to Hannah as far as giving our child away. But for me, that moment in time made it so that I actually don't hover over my children because they're God's first.
mm,
And so that moment in time where I decided that I was going to raise children up to God, and I got better at it as they became teenagers and they started having really their own will. But you have to, if you're really truly going to give your children to God, not you have to trust him enough that you're not trying to live their life for them.
mm,
And I think that's probably the closest we can really come to that. I mean, save obviously people who give up their children to go on missions for their churches, or right now I've got a son who's going to be moving to Australia and starting his life down there.
mm. Yeah, that would be hard.
That's
Very.
about the closest we can come. So, but I think that the really important thing is to um, realize that they are God's first and trust him enough that he's got them, and that you're really not doing much as a parent anyway, unless you're following God, and then you're just hopefully not getting in his way.
Mm, I love that. Wendi?
I was thinking and trying to relate to Hannah because we want to relate the scriptures to our own lives. And having waited for my daughter for so long, and then nursing her. I know not everybody does, but I loved nursing. And I felt such a strong bond. I mean, those moments to me were so precious. And I can only think that, Hannah knows that she's just going to nurse this baby. And then when he's weaned, it's time for her to go deliver him. Right. And I can only picture in my mind just her clinging to those precious moments of nursing him and just loving Samuel and just, wanting to spend every precious moment. And I'm in awe of Hannah's faith because she didn't want to go. Her husband, he was going every year. They would go to Shiloh, like you were saying, and she didn't want to go until he was weaned. And I think it's because that vow she made, she knew she couldn't fulfill it until he was weaned and she actually delivered the child, right? And her faith as she's going through and imagining, I know that I've never placed a baby for adoption, but I have worked with many women who have, and it's heart-wrenching to place a child for adoption. That's kind of what she's doing in a way, because she only gets to see him like once a year after this. And so it's kind of similar to being able to place this child for adoption, and just that heart-wrenching. She knows she's going to be giving him over to the Lord soon, and how much she must have just cherished every single moment, but so much faith that she wanted to fulfill her vow to the Lord that she was going to turn him over. And I found, if you're okay with me reading it, a quote. There was a gentleman, he was in the church, his name was Matthew Cowley, and he was giving a talk on Hannah, and he said a quote. And I think this is something that must have helped Hannah through this quote, because even though Hannah promised her son to the Lord, it talks about she's lending him, right? She lent him to the Lord. And Matthew Kelly said, "How well the mothers know that life is eternal. How well she knew," speaking of Hannah, "that in lending this child to the Lord for this life, that beyond and down through the ages of eternity, he would be her child and she would be his mother." And Eli blessed Elkanah, saying, "The Lord give thee seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to the Lord." That's in 1 Samuel 2:20. And I think Hannah must have clung to the fact that he is mine, but I'm lending him to the Lord. And the Lord really has lent him to her, right? But I think in her getting through it, she must have leaned upon that promise that he will be mine and that I will get to see him and be with him. But how difficult that must have been. And I'm sure she just loved every year she got to go and just cling and visit with him and be with him and just remember and hold on to that vow that she had with the Lord. What faith she must have had to just hold on to that through all those years, having bonded with him and loved him through that weaning period in time.
Oh, I love that. I love what you mentioned about cherish the moments, because honestly, it's true with any person that you interact with. You never know how long any of us are going to be on earth. We don't know when God's going to call us home. And so I love that theme of cherish the time you have, because it may be long, it may be short. We don't know. And so bless Hannah. We follow this through, and we see that finally she weaned Samuel, and she went up with her husband and family to Shiloh and took sacrifice. And then she comes to Eli, that same priest who promised her that she would have the desire of her heart. And this is what she says in verse 26. And she said, "O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition which I asked of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord." And he worshiped the Lord there. And there you go. She fulfilled her vow. I mean, that is courageous, hard. Oh, so hard. Um, but I think we all reach that point with parents where you have to trust that God has them. At some point, you're not going to be able to be with them at all times. I know every time my kids leave home to go to college, I kind of have that moment like, do they know enough? Did I teach them enough before I send them off into the big bad world? Do they know what they need to know? And here, this is tricky because obviously she's leaving him with a priest, and the priest's sons aren't the best examples. So, she's really trusting God that he's going to take care of Samuel. And anyway, any thoughts on that, Wendi?
No, just like we were saying, I'm sure she had to just cling to that fact that he's mine as I'm turning him over. And as you were saying, with your kids, Tamara, sending them off to college, in my mind, I'm thinking, as a mother of infertility, it's almost like I cling to every single teeny tiny thing. Like I was saying earlier, you cherish every single moment, right? When they go to school, I just cherish that. When they went to kindergarten, I think we send our kids off a lot. Like, are they going to be okay? Especially your first one. Are they going to be okay? And then you have the next milestone. You send them to elementary, and then you send them to junior high, and then you send them to high school. Yesterday, I was in the halls of the high school, and I just looked at my daughter and I said, I can't believe you deal with this every day. Bless your heart. Like, it is not easy. And just in my mind, I was thinking the same thing. Have I prepared her enough? Does she have everything? The same daughter that took me, years to have, does she have everything she needs? As you send them off onto college or other places, like Amy, you were saying, sending your son to Australia, or, if they serve a mission or something like that, there's these milestones where you say goodbye and you wonder, are they going to be okay? And are they going to be taken care of? And to just put your tender mama heart in the hands of the Lord and say, okay, I'm just trusting that you're going to watch them and you're going to take care of them. And I know for me, I pray for angels just to be with my kids every single day, because I can't be with them all the time, but I know that God can. And how Hannah must have just thought, okay, he's in God's hands now. I'm just entrusting him over into God's hands. Just again, that faith that it takes to do that. Because I know for me, I have to exercise that faith every day. These beautiful kids, I'm just trusting them to the Lord that they're going to be okay and have the experiences and make it through the challenges and the trials that they need to, and just trusting that he will take care of them, that they are truly in his hands.
Amy?
I have a couple of instances. I have a sister who lost her first child. He didn't live. And I thought about Hannah, and she had to have lived in a time when they were kind of surrounded by that. There was a lot of children dying and even mothers dying in childbirth and different things. And I probably, if I were to venture a guess, I would guess my sister would have loved to have the opportunity to see her son once a year. Right. So Hannah, I don't know what perspective Hannah was coming from on that. Was she just grateful to have a son that she could see once a year? Was she just so grateful to have a son and not be shamed anymore because having a son and passing on the family line was, I mean, there's so much gratitude and so much walking with the Lord, which obviously happened during the infertility, that she literally, I just love that she says, I am the woman that stood by thee here. And I think a lot about affirmations, because affirmations have pulled me out of some pretty dark spots in my life, from the time I was about 21. But this I am, the other day I heard somebody say, when you say I am and then the positive things about you, you're literally using the name of Christ. He is the great I am. And so I think that's a beautiful prayer. She says, I am the woman that stood by thee. And that's an affirmation for me. I say that all the time. I am the girl who's here standing with thee. And so her gratitude is almost overwhelming to me. That was the first thought. The second thought is I have a friend who, she's passed on now. She was my best friend right after high school and a little bit in high school. And she ended up having to, her husband left her. And so she ended up having to send her two babies to him once a week, every weekend or every other weekend. And he was not living even close to the kind of godlike life that she was trying to live. And I remember her just crying on the phone and saying, I send him and I feel like I'm just sending him into the den of iniquity, so to speak. And she said, and she was in a wheelchair, so she couldn't even get down on her knees. But she'd say, I just lay in bed some nights when they're gone and I just pray, you'll watch over them, right? You've got them, right? It's going to be okay, right? Nothing's unrecoverable, right? And so I really think that that's kind of, Hannah had to have gone back and forth between gratitude of getting to see a son once a year, having the name passed on, and this, he's living with Eli. Who's nurturing him? Who's setting a positive example for him? What's going on over there?
Yeah. Oh, I love your insights here, ladies. This is fantastic. And we see those parallels in our day. It's interesting because we have to trust God in so many instances with children. And I've even talked to women who have lost a baby to SIDS, or stillbirth, and trust that, everything is going to work out there. That's hard too. So I think a lot of faith is required of women when we trust God with our babies at any stage of life, right? They're still our children and we still love them, and trust that God in his mercy will help us be able to bring them home eventually. Um, I thought we would wrap this up before we get into Hannah's Psalm, which we'll start covering next week. But and Wendi read a little bit of this in 1 Samuel chapter 2, that Eli blessed Elkanah and Hannah, that the Lord give thee seed of this woman for the loan which thou hast lent unto the Lord. And then we see the beautiful conclusion of her story in verse 21. And the Lord visited Hannah so that she conceived and bare 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the child Samuel grew before the Lord. So God blessed her for fulfilling her vow. She did what she had to do. It was super hard. And he blessed her with 5 more kids. That's pretty amazing to someone who is barren. And I'm amazed at how God fulfills his promises, maybe not in our timetable, but in his wisdom and all of that. Any thoughts on those verses, Amy?
I have another sister. I have a lot of sisters. I have another sister who suffered with having children for a while. She had her first one right away, but then it took her a minute to have another one. And this being able to bear children after really truly is miraculous. My sister ended up having 7 children total after she suffered with infertility for, I think, 6 years after her first. And so you look at this, and God is such a good God. He is such a God of abundance and love and goodness, that whatever is in our best interest, he will send blessings that are different than the ones we want. Sometimes I think about, there's a song I know that talks about he'll love you through the middle, right? He'll love you through the middle, but then you just hang on through the middle, but then he's so abundant in the end. And I love that. He's so abundant in the end, and nobody knows what that abundance is going to look like. And he's even abundant in the middle, I think, because how many of us have walked a road and then can look back and go, oh, he did really have me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be even here.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
he's really abundant. But I love that she continued on to have the 3 sons and the 2 daughters. And yet I keep hearing in my head, I am the woman that stood by thee.
Mm.
And then he's abundant with her, and he says, I know. And you got closer and closer and closer to me. And now you see what I can do. Look what I've done.
Mm. Beautiful. Wendi.
Yeah, just it's a beautiful, beautiful promise. I remember many times I can picture myself in the rocking chair, holding my little girl and nursing her and wondering, will I ever have any more? I don't know if I'll have any more. So I just have to I remember like trying to force myself, you just have to cherish every single moment with this little girl, every little teeny tiny milestone, because you may not have any more. This may be it. And and I just remember that over and over, almost like a guilt I would put on myself, like, you have to just love and enjoy every single second of having this little girl. And as I think and read, as I read Hannah's story and how she just fulfilled her promise, I just can only imagine her thinking the same thing. I don't know if I'm going to have more children, but I'm going to fulfill my promise with the Lord. That just makes me admire her so much more, that she could call on the Lord so strongly and then overcome the bitterness of soul. Like, she just left her sadness there and went home and got pregnant and had this beautiful baby. I see in her face that determination to keep her commitment to the Lord, and as she did, the Lord blessed her with more. And how beautiful and how wonderful that was, I'm sure, for her to know that she got to have more children that she could actually see grow up, not just visit them once a year, but she gets to see them grow up. And then also know that Samuel will still be hers, that she's lent him to the Lord, but he'll still be hers for eternity.
Mm.
That just, I don't know, to me, that's just so much faith and strength that helps me to hold on to the moments that I go through as a mom and a woman. If I just hold on to the Lord with determination, like she did, that I will see the fruits of that. If
Mm.
I just keep grasping and holding on to him, that he will help me overcome my bitterness of soul, or my, it's never going to happen, or it did happen to so and so. It'll help me just, I think, to have more faith in him, just by her sweet example of not knowing but yet being blessed.
Mm. I love that. Wow. This has been so wonderful to be able to talk to you ladies about Hannah and her amazing faith and her courage. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Final takeaways, Amy, and then Wendi.
I think for me, the thing that just keeps replaying in my mind is, what was the greatest desire of her heart? And I love the very end of verse 21 of chapter 2, when it says the child Samuel grew before the Lord. Because I have 5 kids, and all I want for them to do is hear the voice of the Lord and try their very best to do his will. That's all I want for them. And so, and there have been times where I felt like I've said to the Lord, I will let go of this thing that's hard for me to let go of, if you will just help me raise these kids up to thee. If you will really just help them be faithful. And or my husband, I will let go of this thing of my needing to have all of my concerns talked out until my husband is literally glazed over. If you will just intervene, and help them, my children, my husband, me, grow up before the Lord. I will give up anything for that, because I believe in eternity that much. I will give up anything.
Hmm. Wow, that is powerful. Wendi?
Yeah, as Amy was just talking, I thought about, all the moms that I talk to, that, we live in a world where keeping the faith is hard, whatever that faith is. And our kids don't always want to follow that pathway that a mom's heart may follow. But I think as Hannah kept her faith, she knew that Samuel would be taken care of. And we talked about, we didn't know what his experience was, but somehow he grew up to be a good, righteous man because I think she gave him to the Lord. And sometimes I think as moms, we have to do the same thing, like Amy was talking about, that by lending our children to the Lord, whatever that looks like, even if they may or may not choose that path of faith, right, in their own lives, that we will receive them beyond and down through the ages of eternity. Because our mother heart, our desires are strong. We have put our faith in God that he will take care of them wherever they are in their journey, and that they will come back, and that we will have them down through the ages of eternity because we have turned them over to God. And that takes a lot of faith for us in this lifetime, because Hannah lived in some challenging times. We live in some challenging times, and I think we can really relate to, we don't know what it's going to turn out, but we can have hope in the promise of turning them over to God.
Yeah, love it. And my biggest takeaway, honestly, was cherish the small moments. So cherish the small moments, because you don't know how long you have. So give the rest to God. He's a good God. Awesome. Well, ladies, thanks for joining me this morning on this episode of Bible Women in Bathrobes, and have a blessed day.
Thanks for tuning in to Bible Women in Bathrobes, hosted by Women Warriors of Light. We've loved exploring the stories of remarkable women or the teachings of the Savior today with you. If today's episode brought someone special to mind, be sure to spread the word, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a moment of inspiration and sisterhood. Just a friendly reminder, all opinions we share are entirely personal, as we are trying to decipher and apply Bible teachings just like you are. Until next time, stay faithful, and may your journey be blessed and illuminated by God's love.